Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Institute of Exports and International Trade members webinar on how to transport goods successfully to Latin America. We are running this session today to launch and invite you to join a new special interest group, or SIG, for Latin America Customs and Logistics. To explain, when logging onto the member area of the site, you are now able to join the SIG by clicking on Groups and then clicking on the link to the Latin America group there. Here you'll be able to send messages, share best practice, and also useful links with other members of the group. The idea of the SIG is that of our member, Jorge Gonzalez, who will be delivering today's presentation. Jorge has 15 years experience in worldwide exports and imports as both a trade and forward planning logistics coordinator. He is the operations manager for Britain and Latin America Logistics Limited, who assists traders in both the UK and Latin America through a specialised range of multimodal transport services. Before handing over, just a quick note to say you can ask questions at any point during this webinar using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to ask anything related to sending goods to Latin America, and we will have up to 10 to 15 minutes later to go through your questions. But for now, over to you, Jorge.
Thank you, William. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this webinar. We're going to start with the next slide, please, William. We're going to cover today many questions that we get, in the logistics business from businesses that want to export to Latin America. So hopefully this will help you on planning, or if you're already exporting, on realizing a few things that are going to be of use for you. So let's start with this one. It's very often who can export. Any business in the UK can export to Latin America. More often it's a sole trader or a limited company. You do not need a license to export to Latin America, or indeed to any country, but the goods that you're exporting, they might need a license from the UK, or a license in the country that you are planning to export to. We'll cover that in a minute, but for the moment, do realize that you need to have a EORI number in order to be able to export from the UK. That number is for life, is not per shipment, and it will be required for the export entry that it needs to be done for customs, export customs clearance. Next slide, please. In Latin America, anyone also can import, but they need to be registered with the respective government. It's a lot more complex, as you probably know. You need to be registered before. In the UK, if you want to export, you can export and then register as an exporter for taxes, for instance. In Latin America, you need to be registered first. Many times we have the situation where people send things, they have a purchase, they send the goods, and when they arrive in Latin America, it turns out that the importer is not registered and cannot enter. That will take days. Of course, the cargo will incur charges at the airport or at the port. But there is one thing to this, and is that if you are exporting small consignments, like parcels, especially if you're sending at the beginning samples, then you don't need, the importer in Latin America doesn't need to be registered. Most of the times, these goods will just arrive via courier, and you don't need to have that documentation. The importer doesn't need to be registered. But that will depend on the country that you're sending to, because there are like limitations for the couriers there in any of these countries, and it will be maybe limitations on the size of the package. But after certain size, you cannot send it by courier, or maybe kilos. It might be that is a limit of 20 kilo or 50 kilo, and then you cannot send it. It cannot arrive as courier. Maybe the value, sometimes it's $2,000 US. Sometimes it's 200, sometimes it's 5,000. depending on the country. Also, the number of items in the box. If you put too many items of the same in the box, and somehow the government at that point is investigating what is coming on that particular cargo consolidation, they might think, okay, this is clearly commercial. It's not someone purchasing something because there's too many units of this. And by too many, I mean more than maybe 7, 10, then that will be classified as commercial, and they might stop that and ask the importer to be registered before allowing the goods to go through. Although this is rare, in general terms, with courier everything goes through, but it might happen. And the last one in the list there is the frequency of shipments to the same consignee. You may be saying, okay, I'm sending these goods to this person, and we've been sending it, for many months, and nothing has happened. So it's not that he needs to register. It might be the case that the government is not catching up yet with that, but at some point it will. And if it's arriving to the same consignee many, many, many times, they will say, okay, you are clearly importing this for commercial purposes. You are likely to be avoiding taxes. This is, the importer in Latin America. So therefore, we need to investigate this and you need to register. So in general terms, if you just send in samples and it's a small package, a small value, then I wouldn't worry about the importer having to be registered. You can send it by a courier. If it's not like that, if it's large volumes, you need to be very aware that they need to be registered. They need to prove to you that they register and they can import, so that your goods are not going to be stuck in a port there in those countries. Next, please, William. The best place to start to send things to Latin America, and by the way, this applies to other markets in the world, is to know the commodity code. This will help you knowing the restrictions that are going to have the goods in that country. Also, if there are restrictions going out, the taxes that the goods are going to pay. One thing to bear in mind, very, very important with the commodity codes, is that they're generally 10 digits, a full tariff code. Could be more, but in general terms, there are 10. And the first 6 digits are harmonized. There's many, many countries with the same code for the same product, and that's what is called harmonized, meaning that when you're sending these goods to Latin America, and maybe the person who's buying this asking you for the tariff code, if you give the tariff code that applies here in the UK, you both need to bear in mind that it's only the first 6 digits that are going to be the same in that country, the same in Mexico, Colombia, or Argentina. But the rest of the digits, the following 4, are going to change in that country. So when you're looking at taxes and restrictions in that particular country, you cannot go and investigate this with the tariff code from the UK. You need to just take the first 6 digits and then go and investigate what tariff code applies in that country in Latin America, and then find out the taxes and restrictions there. The UK government has launched recently a tool, which is this one here. That's the main page, and this is the link to that tool, where you put the country, let's say Guatemala or El Salvador, and it's going to tell you the restrictions and taxes for a particular commodity. After this, it will ask you for the tariff code or the commodity, and it will guide you on the maybe licenses that you're going to need there, or the taxes that you need to pay. It's helpful, but it's not the full picture. Ideally, you should consult this one, and also similar pages in the other government in Latin America. Most of them are in Spanish, so that's when you will need then an assistant from a customs agent to to really check what is the restrictions there. Most goods are going to, especially food or items um, for the skin or health or things that are going to be used for human consumption in general. They're likely to have to require a license in those countries. They usually take about 1 to 6 months to obtain. So before sending anything there, you need to be sure that both the importer is registered as an importer and can import, and also that the goods can be imported in those countries. Next slide, please. Um, Not only the goods might have some restrictions to enter those countries, also the packaging and certainly the wood that is used to send those goods. Like for instance, the pallets. All of the Latin American countries will have this restriction. Brazil is particularly, keen on this one with the wood, and they need to have this stamp. It needs to be treated wood, and generally it has this stamp, which is the ISPM 15 standard. Next, please. To the question of whether it's cheaper to send by air or sea, I came up with this, general rule, which is if what you're sending is less than a cubic meter, most of the times it's going to be cheaper by air. If the cargo is between 1 meter, 1 cubic meter, and 2 cubic meters, then we need to investigate, if there might be some sort of promotions with the airline or some routes that can be used. And the answer is that it needs to be investigated, both options, in order to see at that particular moment which one would be cheaper. And that's between 1 cubic meter and 2 cubic meters. After 2 cubic meters, it is very, very likely it's going to be cheaper by sea. Then you need to decide in terms of times, in terms of the urgency that these goods, and also the manipulation that these goods will need to get there. But in general terms, that would be the answer to the question: is cheaper by air or sea? And this is the way at the bottom is the way you calculate the cubic meter for the boxes. For people who are beginning to export, a question that we have very often is if when we're talking about a cubic meter, we're talking about a box that is a cubic meter. And the answer is it doesn't have to be a single box. It could be several boxes that when you measure them comes up as 1 cubic meter. It doesn't have to be a single cubic meter box. Next, please. The main differences of sending goods by air or sea is the transit times. By air, not all the Latin American countries have a direct flight from the UK. So many times they go via hubs in Europe or USA or Canada. So you need to think of maybe 3 to 5 days for the goods to arrive to the airport or destination. In sea, if it's sent by sea, then we're talking about 15 days when it's a direct transit to certain countries, or maybe 30 days or even 40 days when it goes via other countries before it goes to that destination. So air will be one when it's a direct flight, 1 to 5 days, and sea freight will be 15 to 30 days. That will be the average. Port charges, this burns many people when they don't know about these things and they're doing their first transactions, or even if they don't many, but at some point they're gonna get to this. And as an exporter, you need to know that when you send goods and when they arrive to the destination, there's just certain period of time that is going to be free for storage. With sea freight, is usually 3 to 7 days, unless you are sending large volumes, and then you can negotiate more days. More days would be maybe 14, 21 days. So what happens is that the cargo arrives at that port, at that seaport, and it has a few days, 5 to 7, to be customs cleared. Those days are free, but after that, the container will start incurring charges at around $100 to $150 per day. So you need to decide, if that happens, who is going to cover for these costs. Is it going to be you or the buyer? But this is something that is in the negotiation when you're selling the goods, that this needs to be talked. With air freight, sometimes you get 24 hours, then you get storage charges, but there are also countries there which do not allow for any free days in the airport, and as soon as it arrives, it has rent charges. So it's about $50 per 100 kilo, $20 to $50 per 100 kilo. So that's something that you need to discuss with the buyer in case that happens. Who's going to pay for that? Of course, that will depend also on the Incoterm that is used. We're going to see Incoterms in a few minutes. Export customs clearance in the UK are very, very quick. There's not many really stops or restrictions, only when goods need maybe a license. But if you have the license, of course, there's not going to be any issues. With that tariff code that we talked about at the beginning, when you put that tariff code in that tool, or if you can call the government, they will tell you if that particular commodity code requires a license. One could be, for instance, a dual use, when goods can be used for military purposes. So the government will ask for a license. Sometimes, even if it says that it might apply, it might just it follows under certain category where it doesn't really apply, but it's something that you need to find out. But in general terms, there's no issues with the customs export in the UK. It's done in minutes, and this in contrast with the goods. When the goods arrives in Latin America, it takes quite a bit more. For sea freight, instead of minutes, it takes about 7 days to clear. That's when it becomes very important that you know that after that you're going to start paying, or the buyer is going to start paying charges. And with air freight, it will take about 3 days. Those will be the times there, and the 3 days. There is also the free time that you get when you are loading the goods. Let's say you ask for a company to collect those goods from a warehouse, or from your business. Bear in mind that you will have also some time, a limited time, to load those goods. Otherwise, you incur on waiting time. And it's the same when you unload those goods at destination. If the buyer is asking you to deliver this to the warehouse, and you're contracting services to do this, it might be that you send you contract a vehicle to be there at certain hour, but the vehicle takes many hours to be unloaded, that waiting time is going to be charged to you if you are the one that are delivering to that warehouse. So there's certain hours, usually 3 to 5 hours to unload or load when it's a full container. When it's less than a full container, it will be between half an hour and 1 hour, both to unload or to load. And you also need to bear in mind that the vehicle, usually when you contract these services, the vehicle that arrives there when it's not a full container is not going to have a tail lift. So if you need a tail lift, get into the use of requesting that vehicle with a tail lift, either for a collection or for a delivery. Next slide, please. In regards to Brexit and Latin America, as you probably know, there is a transition period at the moment. That's where we are until the 31st of December. That means that at the moment, nothing has changed with regards to the documentation when sending goods to this market. They all have the same name. Nothing has changed. But from the 1st of January, it's said at the moment, things will start changing. There's going to be hopefully new trade deals with the region. Some of the ones that we have right now, which are of course under the European trade agreements, will stay. We'll look at those in a minute. But for the moment, just note that there are changes coming. We don't know really how they're going to develop, but for the moment, everything stays exactly the same. Next slide, please. The documentation that you need for Latin America will be an airway bill in the case of air freight, a seaway bill in the case of sea freight, packing list, commercial invoice. This commercial invoice should include, because it's requested in many of these countries, the tax ID of the buyer. Then, of course, certificates and licenses that might be required either from the UK or from the country of destination. And with regards to the certificates, the certificate of origin, which is required, sorry, a bit of water here now, which is required for alleviate the taxes, the duty, and in some cases to eliminate them completely. Sorry. That document is called a UR1, and with Mexico, the agreement is still, to continue that agreement is still in talks. With the bloc of Central America, it's been pretty much laid out to continue the same with the UK from the 31st of January. There will be changes, of course, but in general terms, the deal will continue. Then UK and the Central American bloc, which include Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, Panama, yes, those 6 countries. The other bloc is Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru in South America. Those are already ratified, and that will continue. UK and that bloc, and Chile as well will be the same. So we're pending Mexico, but I'm sure they will come to an agreement as well, the UK and Mexico, to continue that commercial relationship. Next slide, please. Taxes in Latin America. And also, there could be also the question if when you send goods, you need to pay taxes in the UK. The answer is that when you're exporting, you do not pay taxes in the UK. Also the VAT for the services, like the customs process or the transport to the port or the actual freight, international freight, it doesn't, the VAT doesn't apply to that. So no taxes when you're exporting. When the goods arrive in Latin America, then there will be taxes there, depending on the goods. There will be a duty if the good, a particular good attracts that duty, or if there are no relationship with them agreements in place that will benefit the goods for that particular tax. VAT is likely to be incurred, and other taxes is not usually is not that simple as duty and VAT. There's plenty of other taxes there, and the duty could range from 5 to 35. The VAT might range from 15 to 30, and other taxes might range from 10 to even 90%. But again, it will be the tariff code that will determine will indicate what taxes are attracted. The way you calculate those taxes are the duty you calculate using the percentage of duty that product is attracting. So it will be just that percentage. So if the goods are £1,000 and the duty is 20%, well, you will pay 20% on that, which is £200 duty when applies. The VAT is calculated over the duty. In this example, would be over £200 plus the cost of the goods, plus the cost of the freight, plus the cost of the insurance. So you add all those four things that are there, and on top of that is that you calculate the percentage of the VAT that is applicable. And the other taxes, well, it's difficult to put them here because there's too many, and they're dependent on even on regions. Like Brazil will have taxes in one part of the country different from the other, and also depending on the product, that it will be very, very complicated to put it here on that slide. But just bear in mind that there will be more with different calculations. Next slide, please. Cargo insurance is usually not included when you ask for a transport quote. It's usually said, the quote is going to be given excluding insurance. So it's for you to ask the same agent that is giving you that quote to provide insurance separately, or for you to, book it directly with an insurance broker. Is it compulsory? In the UK, no, but in some places in Latin America, it is. The agents will not take those goods if they're not insured. This is usually after certain value, maybe. Well, it depends. Some of them have different thresholds, but if we're talking about maybe 50,000 US dollars or 100,000 US dollars, then you might encounter that they're going to tell you, if you want us to transport this, you need to take our insurance. Find out if it's compulsory, and if you feel okay to maybe not taking it. Is it worth it? I guess yes, and I say I guess is because it is unlikely that anything is going to happen to the cargo. For many years, Latin America has had bad reputation, but we know we ship to these markets constantly, and something happened. Of course, it happens. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it is very unlikely. So it is worth it, of course, the extra protection, but unless it's really, really high value, probably no. Although I'm saying that insurance is not that expensive, so maybe it is a good habit, but it's entirely, up to you how you feel and where to take it or not. Risk in Latin America, as I mentioned, of course there are, but the infrastructure there is being, improved in the last 2 decades quite a lot, and is in general terms safe. Risk in the UK, well, you know that is low, although things can happen, but again, in general terms, is very low. The cost of the insurance in general terms will be between 0.5% of the value percentage or 1% of the value, but most of the times there will be a minimum if the value doesn't fall between this 5% or sorry 0.5% and 1%. If it's too low, then there will be a minimum of maybe 25, 65, 150, depending on the cost of the goods. What covers is the actual damage of the box, because many people think that it's going to cover for the goods inside, and unless you take really specialized insurance cargo, most insurance is just going to cover for the box. If the box arrives with no damage, even if something happens to the goods inside, the insurers are not going to cover for that. So it will cover for damage to the cargo, and by cargo I mean the boxes or the pallets, lost or total destruction, or if it's stolen. But it will rarely cover for the goods inside if there are if you send, for instance, wine and the bottles are broken. It would be down for you to pack them in a way that is going to be suitable for the transport. Next, please. Incoterms is totally related to the negotiation that you get with the buyer. There's more Incoterms than these ones that we're showing here. These are the most common that we come across with sending cargo to Latin America. For those ones who are not familiarized with these Incoterms, and if you're sending or you're planning to ship to Latin America, please do investigate these ones. I wanted to mention the last one because it's something that we come across very often. People wanted to send goods to Latin America to the destination warehouse or the destination address. When the buyer asks, oh no, I don't want to get involved in any customs there in the UK or any customs here in this country, I need you to please deliver to my warehouse or to my house. In that case, that would be delivered duty paid. But bear in mind that not many countries in Latin America allow for this Incoterm. There will be the situation where you send this and the importer in the end is the one that needs to pay directly the taxes. So it's not going to go through. It's not going to go through customs because they will be asking, okay, who's going to pay for this? Then someone will say, no, it's the exporter in the UK. The government will say, no, they're not allowed to pay this. No one is, but the importer, and the importer is not either by the contract that have with you, maybe they don't want to pay this, or perhaps they're not registered as an importer and the goods are going to be stuck in there. So pay attention to this delivery duty paid, and before doing that, before sending all the way to the warehouse, when they ask you for this, make sure that that particular country allows for this Incoterm. Next slide, please. Best practice when sending to Latin America to check everything that we talked about is to send a small shipment, maybe a small pallet with just a few boxes. And I put there in red, not as courier, because as I explained at the beginning, with courier, it might go through without testing what you need to test with regards to customs authorities, authorizations that the importer might need. So not with courier, but you need to send in regular freight a small shipment. In this way, you will test everything that needs to be tested, and that's the best practice when you're starting with a new buyer or a new country. Next, please. If you need to return goods to the UK, this will not attract UK taxes. All you need to mention to your agent, or if you're doing the import yourself, is that this is returning, and then present, the documentations that were used for the exportation, and this will not attract any duties or taxes in the UK. Next, please. I believe is the last one. Yes. Okay, William. That was the presentation.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Just a reminder to everyone that you can ask questions using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We've got up to kind of 10-15 minutes to do so, so please do ask away or leave any comments. That'd be really appreciated. First question, which we've not really touched on yet, is obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on trade to Latin America so far, Jorge?
Yes, William. Well, it has affected in the way that the virus has spread in the different areas. Some countries had the need to close the airports, which will, of course, affect the amount of imports and export done in those particular countries. So it is definitely affecting the businesses, and certainly the interest of some people. They're waiting to see when this is going to improve to purchase orders. So at the moment, what is moving with special routes sometimes is the goods that are absolutely needed, like food or medicines. But certainly there's been an impact, but it's been depending on the countries and how they've been affected by the actual virus.
Has it impacted the modes of travel at all? Just looking at some stats from IATA, which said global air freight demand is down 28%, but capacity in Latin America is more than halved for April. So is it fair to say at the moment, if you're shipping goods to Latin America, you may need to think about using a different mode of transport than what you usually would do?
No. The cargo is still moving. It might be, which is very important, is that the cost has increased sometimes because longer routes are needed, but the cargo is moving. So that's, I mean, if you send something, it will get there, even by the air freight. It's the passengers that are being more affected, because some countries are not even, the ban is completely, that they are not receiving any passengers. The cargo is going there, but the main effect is that prices at the moment are up for those goods to reach the destination.
That's really interesting. Thank you. The question we had in is, what other trade barriers could there be at the moment for selling goods to Latin America?
Um, well, at the moment, it would be probably what we just mentioned, which is the situation, because maybe not only exporters in the UK, but importers in Latin America are waiting to see what happens. But without thinking of the situation, maybe when things improve by next year, I think the opportunities are certainly there, because the market in Latin America is a market that is very dynamic at the moment. is growing, even despite the situation, it will continue growing. And the UK government is very keen also in expanding to these countries. They have set up many offices there. They have the support on the ground. So I think it's a very, very good opportunity for exporters in the UK to look at that market at the moment, even if it's not for this year, to plan for the future and get there certainly when the opportunity reopens.
Fantastic, thank you. Just remind everyone you can ask questions using the control panel. We do have a few minutes left, so if you do have any questions, please do ask away. Oh, just got one in from Yavor, who's asked, who are the government or independent organisations who support business between UK and Latin America?
Okay, thank you. Yes, there are the main one here in the UK is DIT, DIT, but there are also chambers of commerce for the respective countries in Latin America. Most of them, they have chambers of commerce here in the UK that you can contact. So I would suggest you contact DIT for the UK and the chambers of commerce, but also chambers of commerce in the countries in Latin America. They will be very happy to assist you, not only on the logistic side of it, but also on the commercial part of it.
That's great. And I think through the Institute, I've come across a few organisations as well who've been specialised in this area. So there's a company called Sunny Sky Solutions based in Uruguay, I think it is. Gabriella, who's actually a member of the Institute and is always very supportive of UK companies looking to sell into Latin America. So if anyone wants her contacts, do please just pop me an
Okay.
email afterwards and I can put you in contact.
And exactly, yes, thank you. And it goes without saying that, of course, the Institute of Export is here to help.
Thank you, thank you. And also we do have our doing business guides as well, which I think we've got a fair few Latin American ones. So again, those are very concise, small published guides, which we can send you copies of or send you the online links to. A question from Karen, who's asked, is there anything to be aware of if UK companies are fulfilling e-commerce orders to LatAm consumers apart from DDP?
Well, I guess the thing is that that's usually done by parcels, William, and we don't generally move parcels. I wouldn't know exactly how to respond to that question, I'm afraid, because we move mainly cargo, and this is done usually by parcels for e-commerce. But in general terms, I would say that it's a growing market. In my travels to Latin America, I realized that certainly more and more people are buying online. So it's a growing market. But in logistic terms, I'm afraid I wouldn't be in a position to advise if the question is that one, unless they could be slightly more specific.
I'll give Karen a chance to potentially clarify further, but yeah,
Okay.
just to say we have done an e-commerce webinar recently, and we've again got members who are in that space, and hopefully this is something we can use the Latin America Special Interest Group to bring up questions such as these, and we can hopefully, as the Institute, put you into contact with the right people for those questions. Anyhow, I think we're starting to run dry of questions, so it's a 45-minute webinar today. Thank you once again, Jorge, for time today and for the presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And as we wrap things up, we hope you found that interesting and you are now minded to join and use the Latin American SIG group on the Institute's member area. A reminder that to join the group, you just need to log in, go to the groups page, and then click on the Latin America Customs and Logistics group. And once you're in there, you can share messages, share best practice, useful links about sending goods to and from Latin America. And also, it's just a place to meet each other and hopefully arrange once we're kind of out of this phase of lockdown and social distancing is even further eased. Hopefully, we can all meet each other in due time as well. If you do have any questions about the group, please do contact our membership team at membershipservices@export.org.uk. You've also got the contacts there for Jorge for Britain Latin America logistics, and also the IOE number there as well if you have any questions. But for now, I hope you found that useful and stay safe and goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.